A very warm welcome, art lovers, to Art Gallery Explorer, the vlog that explores and celebrates the London art scene. Coming up, I want to take you inside the National Gallery, the building you can see behind me, to explore my most anticipated show of 2025. Entitled Siena, the Rise of Painting 1300 to 1350, this exhibition promises to bring together over 100 works from the beautiful Italian Tuscan city of Siena, focusing on four main artists: Duccio, Simone Martini and the Lorenzetti brothers. And this show, apparently, according to the pre-exhibition publicity, has a really interesting thesis that it was actually Siena between 1300 and 1350 that provided the Petri dish, if you like, for the Italian Renaissance. And it was only the fact that the Black Death cruelly cut down this city's artistic output, seeing the population decline from 60,000 to 30,000, that the baton was handed on to Florence and the Renaissance that the art history books tell us about today. This show has been getting rave reviews when it showed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So I absolutely can't wait to come inside and explore it with you today. Come and join me at the National Gallery.
I'm going to try and let the works do the talking as much as possible, but I will provide a small introduction to each of the artists on show. I'm also going to choose some music to accompany the exhibition, but if it's not your taste, then as I always say, please mute it and choose something of your own. It's particularly apt that the first work we see in the exhibition is this Virgin and Child by Duccio di Boninsegna. Duccio is seen by many as the greatest of the Sienese artists of this generation, and the Virgin Mary is intimately associated with the city of Siena and its identity. Indeed, the city was believed to be by the Sienese under the Virgin Mary's protection. And in the first room, we kind of get a little flavour of the influences on artists like Duccio, especially Byzantine art. We don't know when Duccio was born, but his first works of art are recorded as being produced in 1278 and 1279, and as he died in 1319. And interestingly, the exhibition tells us that Sienese city records reveal that he'd been in trouble for various misdemeanors, including unpaid taxes and unruly behaviour. So we can assume that he was quite a bohemian figure. But his art is superb, and what came across to me was both his skill as a narrative painter and the way that he was really keen on capturing emotional human experience, which kind of differentiated him from artists that came before. Duccio's absolute masterpiece was his Maesta. Maesta literally translates as majesty, and as an altarpiece it was 5 meters high, 5 meters wide, fully painted and gilded on both sides. As you're about to see in these pictures, the front of the Meister shows the Virgin sitting at the centre of a heavenly court, whereas the back shows a sequence of scenes from Christ's life. Duccio actually signed this painting, and his signature is unprecedented in both its wording and location. As you can see here, inscribed into the Virgin's footstool, he says, "Holy Mother of God, bring peace to Siena and bring life to Duccio, who painted you like this." Scandalously, the Meister was sawn in half in 1771, and the predella was dismantled. Its planks were cut up so individual scenes could be displayed and later sold separately. And one of the wow moments of this exhibition is that it reunites all 8 of the surviving panels from the back predella for the first time in 250 years. Simone Martini became Siena's star artist in the years after Duccio's death. He was employed very, very regularly by the city's civic commissioners, and his name appears almost continuously in public records. I really enjoyed his work, both for his mastery of small works like this and large-scale altarpieces, but also for his technical virtuosity in capturing clothing. And as you can hopefully see from this St. John the Evangelist, kind of that human focus that we saw with Duccio coming to the fore. There's a new humanism in the works, as you can hopefully see here as well, which became obviously the standard for Florentine Renaissance painters. painter Pietro Lorenzetti and sculptor Tino de Cameno were both artists who travelled from Siena but produced most of their work outside of Siena's city walls. And the exhibition rather tantalisingly puts forward that they knew each other quite well. This section stands out not for focusing on the four main artists, but on works which explain the wider cultural richness of Siena, both in terms of its famed gold work, but also imported fabrics, as well as other painted works, as you can see here. Ambrosio Lorenzetti was the younger brother of Pietro, and it's quite possible that he worked on Duccio's masterpiece, the Majesty altar. I found him the artist that sort of looked forward the most to the Florentine Renaissance works that I'm much more familiar with, especially in his approach to narrative, but also construction of space. We're not yet at that Florentine sense of perspective, but you can see from these works that Ambrosio is experimenting with space and with perspective. Later on in this room, we also see more work by Pietro Lorenzetti, who we were already focused on in this show, including a focus on his altarpiece, The Birth of the Virgin. We see Pietro Lorenzetti's The Birth of the Virgin that was commissioned in 1335 for Siena Cathedral, where it would join Simone Martini's Annunciation in flanking Duccio's Maesta in Siena Cathedral. Incredible combination of works. In 1309, the papacy settled in Avignon in southern France and remained there until 1362. The court obviously was looking for artists, and there seemed to be a particular attraction for Sienese paintings. And in the first half of the 14th century, the city, according to the exhibition, became home to one of the greatest communities of Sienese painters and goldsmiths out of Tuscany. Foremost amongst them was Simone Martini, who had left Siena in 1333 and spent the final decade of his life in Avignon, where many of these works were from.
Well, art lovers, I hope you enjoyed that visual feast from the National Gallery. That was the Siena show. It's a couple of days since I visited the exhibition, and my main memory of being in there is I just didn't want the exhibition to end. I was circulating round and round as the clock ticked towards 6 o'clock, bearing in mind I entered at just after 3. And feasting on the gold and the beautiful art that I was observing. It was a magnificent experience, and I do urge you to get along if you can do. Why was it so good? Well, at the centre of this was obviously the art and the city of Siena. Now, in traditional art history, Siena is often seen as a footnote to the Florentine Renaissance, and this exhibition definitely corrects that idea. Siena itself was developing many of the traits between 1300 and the Black Death in 1348 that went on to become hallmarks of the Florentine Renaissance. Primarily amongst this was the way that all of the four main artists breathed such life into their figures and their animals and humans alike. It's really important that this show starts with the Byzantine icon style work, which is flat and kind of static, and next to that is Duccio's Virgin and Child. And what's fascinating about this is it's not the greatest work of art. If you look at the Christ figure, he's like an adult baby, but it's the way he reaches up and touches his mother's face in that incredibly human gesture, which sets the show alight. And it continues with work after work after work. Pietro Lorenzetti animates his figures, but then all of the major artists do as well. And so we begin to see that humanism, which is a hallmark of the Renaissance greats, appearing in the city of Siena years before they began to develop in Florence. So that was incredibly special. As well as this humanism, there was a real sense that the artists were playing with space and using artistic techniques to develop a new way of making the art lover feel totally immersed in the art. It was the Florentines who developed single point perspective. I was actually up at the Ashmolean a couple of weeks ago, as some of you will know, reviewing the Anselm Kiefer show, and saw while I was there Uccello's Hunt in the Forest, which is kind of like a really important Renaissance work when looking at perspective. But these Sienese artists were playing with perspective and playing with space. Look at Pietro Lorenzetti's painting here, for example. It makes you feel as if you're kind of in the space, in the room. And it's wonderful to see these artists playing with space in this way. I absolutely adored that. Thirdly, all of the artists were fantastic narrative painters, and narrative paintings become a really important part of Western art and becomes a really important part of Western art. We have to remember that the majority of Sienese at this time were illiterate, and so they had to read these paintings a bit like today we would almost like read cartoons, and that was absolutely stunning to see. And so you found yourself being immersed in the stories of these works, which I absolutely adored. So those three things, the humanism, the playing with space, and the narrative storytelling, put Siena right at the heart of the development of Western art, and that was really thrilling to see open up in front of you. Yeah, so secondly, the reason I absolutely love this show was because of the quality of and the range of the loans. They came from Texas, from Madrid, obviously from Siena, from Paris, as well as from New York and London. And the Metropolitan Museum of Art website says that there are only really 13 independent Duccio works in existence if we take the Maestra as one big work. And so you know, the fact that there's so many brought together for this exhibition, and the works from the other artists as well, does make this a truly once-in-a-lifetime show, not just a once-in-a-generation show. I don't think it will happen again. And thirdly, I have to pay immense credit to the curation of the show. It worked really well, splitting the artists into their own kind of mini exhibitions, so we could get to know both their story and the development of their art. And this show was exquisitely lit. There are no windows in the bowels of the National Gallery, but you didn't need them. The light lit up the gold of these works beautifully. Hopefully that came across in my vlog. And there was very little ugly glare. That's my kind of nemesis, if you like. It was just exquisitely produced. So for those three reasons, I thoroughly recommend you come along. When I'm thinking about these exhibitions, I always think about the good, the bad and the beautiful, but it's been very, very hard to think of anything bad about this show. If you are into art history and you're into Renaissance art and you want to appreciate glorious, glorious art, the only sort of tiny criticism was that personally I didn't find the room, which was not looking at the artists themselves, as compelling. But having said that, I was very glad it was there. I wanted to see the gold work and learn about the goldsmiths of Siena, so that's not a criticism at all. So there's nothing really bad I can think about. It wasn't even too crowded, bearing in mind it was a sellout Saturday, so that's really, really good. In terms of the beautiful, there are several works that I want to draw your attention to, from multiple ones that I could have chosen. The first one is this Martini of St. John the Evangelist. Look at his facial expression. This is the humanism I'm talking about, that pensive, furrowed brow. It's just absolutely incredible. And just look at the cloth as well. Look at his clothing and how that's executed. And the exhibition explains that this was probably originally part of a 3-panelled work that also would have had the dead Christ in the middle, hence why St. John the Evangelist is looking that way, and then the grieving Virgin Mary would have been on the other side. This work was one of the ones I would have on my wall because it combined the humanism with the beautiful execution and a kind of narrative twist as well. Another work that I absolutely adored was also by Martini, and that was this Crucifixion, or Christ on the Cross. It's so small, it's so pared back. This was a work for a private patron. It would have been on their wall as a devotional object, and I found it absolutely beautiful because everything is stripped back. You don't often see crucifixion scenes like this. Obviously, I had to choose a Duccio as well, and I've chosen this panel from the predella and the calling of the apostles Peter and Andrew. I just love the net, the bulging net, the kind of concern on their faces. They're not totally bought by this idea of following Jesus, are they? And look at the bulging fishing net, incredibly human, the detail of the fishing net as well. I absolutely love this work. I loved Ambrogio Lorenzetti's St. Nicholas panels because they showed the narrative art at its best, and they were so brilliantly colourful. So I really, really enjoyed that work. I just thought it was brilliant. And finally, another one by Martini. I'm beginning to think he was probably my favourite artist out of them, actually, when I'm thinking about the works I enjoyed the most. This one, Christ Discovered in the Temple, has everything you would want from a glorious Sienese piece of art. It has the furious expression of Joseph, Jesus Christ's father, because Christ had snuck off from his parents to go and debate with the elders in the temple. And then there's the sort of worry of Mary. And finally, there is the surliness of Jesus himself. He's been caught as a teenager doing something that he should not have done. He's being told off, and like many teenagers, he doesn't like it. It's a great work, isn't it? It's one that I would absolutely love on my wall. And within that snapshot, you see why the Sienese are taking this art to a different place. Yes, so overall, art lovers, not surprisingly, I'm actually going to give this a 10 out of 10. So let's ring the bells and celebrate that. Yeah, I only give 10 out of 10s when I feel it's a once-in-a-lifetime show, when the quality of the loans and the curation match the ambition of the show, and this exhibition does all of those things. So I really advise you to get along, if you can do, to the National Gallery. If you can't, and I'm aware lots of you won't be able to, hopefully this kind of at least made you feel you'd visit it. I think that £20 is outstanding value when you compare that to a Premier League football ticket or a West End show price. You're seeing absolutely world-class art, one of the best exhibitions you're going to see this year, for a price which I think is reasonable. The gallery says you'll spend 50 to 60 minutes minutes in there. I spent a lot longer than that, and I think you'll want to too if you do go along. It's on until the 22nd of June, so it's got quite a long run. It's not selling out yet. I don't know if it will be sort of Van Gogh-esque levels, because it may not have the popular appeal, but I'm pretty sure weekends will start selling out as the reviews come through. So do book your tickets if you're going to go. Thank you ever so much for watching. Do subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. There'll be lots more coming up over the next weeks.